What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name's Bernie. Thank you for joining us for another college football preview and prediction. Today we're going to be looking at this week's matchup between the number 2 Alabama Crimson Tide and the Tennessee Volunteers. If you guys like what you see today, make sure to leave a thumbs up, comment your thoughts on the game down below, and subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more previews and predictions just like this, and enjoy the video. Before we get too far into the previews for each team and my prediction for this game, let's look at this history of this classic third Saturday in October matchup. The last game that these two teams played against each other was last year, which Alabama took by a score of 35-13. In fact, Alabama has won each one of these two teams' 13 previous meetings, dating back to 2006 when Tennessee beat Alabama by a score of 16-13 in a nice come-from-behind victory. Alabama has been pretty good to start the year. They come into this game with a record of 4-0 with wins against Missouri, number 13 Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and then their win last week against number 3 Georgia. Let's take a look in depth at this Georgia game, and obviously the highlights have to start with their defense. This is a team that was really struggling on defense before this game, but they really locked down throughout the entire game, but especially in that second half where they allowed 0 points. They had Stetson Bennett uncomfortable all game long. He only passed 18 for 40. He was sacked 2 times, intercepted 3 times, and we don't have to go that far back before we really had questions about this Alabama defense. Only a week before the Georgia game, they were playing Ole Miss, allowed 48 points, but this Alabama defense looked a lot better, and I'm really excited to see what they can do this week. But we can't talk about the Georgia game without talking about how equally impressive Alabama's offense is. They don't have as many questions around them, but boy, this is a talented offense. And it all starts with Mac Jones. In the Georgia game, he passed 24 for 32 for 417 yards. He threw 4 touchdowns, and after the interception, he was nearly perfect throughout the game. Let's flip over to the backfield, and we got Najee Harris, who we've come to just expect big things really from week in and week out, and that's exactly what he did against Georgia. 31 carries, 152 yards, and he tacked on another touchdown. But the big thing that I want to focus on is how deep this Alabama receiving core is looking. And it all starts with the guys like Devonta Smith and Jaylen Waddle, both guys who had over 160 receiving yards last week. And Tennessee is definitely going to have to pay a lot of attention to this core of guys in this week's matchup. I mean, obviously, it's not hard to recognize how great Alabama has been, especially when you look at it from an individual statistics standpoint. Before we move on to Tennessee, let's just take a look at these individual stats and where they rank. Mac Jones ranks number 1 overall in passing yards in the SEC. Najee Harris ranks number 1 in the SEC in total rushing yards. Jaylen Waddle and Devonta Smith rank number 2 and number 3 respectively in receiving yards. And Daniel Wright is currently tied for 3rd with 2 interceptions in the SEC. Let's flip over to the Tennessee Volunteers, and it's been a very disappointing last couple of weeks for them. They come into this week with a 2-2 record. They have wins against South Carolina and Missouri, but losses against number 3 Georgia and the blowout loss last week against Kentucky. I'm not necessarily a Tennessee fan, but they are one of the teams that I tend to root for. And this season has been disappointing, as I said before. They have talented rosters, it seems like year in, year out. They have decent recruiting classes, but it seems like all of the time they struggle to win against big teams, but also looking at last week, teams that they just should be beating. Let's flip over to the game summary from last week's game against Kentucky, and obviously it was an extremely disappointing loss and a blowout 1-2 by a score of 38-7, but we really have to start with the quarterback situation. Garantano could not have had a worse start to the game. He only played a quarter and a bit before he got pulled, and he had already thrown 2 pick sixes and lost a fumble. Tennessee then pulled him at the early part of the second quarter, brought in their sophomore quarterback, JT Shrout. So JT Shrout came in, he immediately threw an interception. He only threw 1 pass, and Garantano was put back into the game. He ended the game passing 14 for 21 with only 88 passing yards. There were some positives, though, and I mean, it's got to start with Eric Gray. He's really the highlight of this offense. 24 carries against Kentucky for 128 yards, and Ty Chandler, their other back, also added on another 51. But the big stat that I want to focus on is their third down conversions, and if you've watched my other previews and you've watched my post-game shows, you know that I'm a big guy on the third down conversions because it really is one of, if not the most important down. And 3 for 12, I mean, I know Tennessee is struggling on really all parts of their offense, but that's something that they definitely have to figure out if they want any chance to beat Alabama this week. Tennessee's defense had 2 sacks and again, the turnover, which was the fumble as well, but Kentucky really had their way throughout the game, especially running the ball. 6 guys in double digits running, 5 of those guys over 20 yards rushing, and I mean, Kentucky really did what they wanted to. Obviously, Kentucky's defense was also the main highlight. 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, and the fumble recovery as well. So Kentucky's defense was absolutely sensational. Before we get to the head-to-heads, the betting lines, and my predictions, all of that good stuff, let's first take a look at the individual highlights for Tennessee in the SEC. And as I mentioned before, it starts with Eric Gray, their highlight of the offense. Right now, he currently ranks number 6 in the SEC in rushing yards. And if we flip over to the defense, DeAndre Johnson currently is tied for first in the SEC in sacks. In these past preview videos, I've never done something like this, which is a new segment that I want to start, which is the head-to-head between each of the 2 teams. So this is a head-to-head in the last 10 matchups between Alabama and Tennessee. In the last 10 games against Tennessee, Alabama has a record of 10-0. They're 7-3 on the over-unders and 7-3 against the spread. In their last 16 meetings, Alabama is 11-4-1 against the spread and 8-1 in their last 9. On to the betting lines now and my prediction, but before we get into it, just remember, I'm filming this video on Monday, which is obviously almost a full week before the game starts. In between now and then, the lines are going to fluctuate as always. At the time that I'm filming this video, Alabama opened on the money line as a minus 2,500 with Tennessee as a plus 800. This really comes as no surprise. Obviously, everybody expected Alabama to be a very big favorite. On the spread, Alabama opened as a 20.5 point favorite, and the over-under game total currently is at 61.5. I said it before, and I'll say it again. Alabama struggled at the beginning of the season offensively, but they really found it in the Georgia game, especially in half 2. Then this is a Tennessee offense that is really struggling, and regardless of who they put at the quarterback position, this is a team that is bound to turn the ball over. And regardless of which Alabama team shows up, I expect that Tennessee will give Alabama some freebies, whether it's a fumble or an interception. So I really like Alabama in this matchup. My prediction would be that Tennessee scores somewhere in the range of 14 to 17 points, and Alabama, with their electric offense, scores somewhere towards the high 40s, low 50s. So I expect this game to be a blowout. In terms of my predictions on the line, I think Alabama at minus 2,500 obviously is a waste of time to bet. There's just no value there. But I like the Alabama spread. I like Alabama at minus 20.5. And I do think that there's going to be quite a bit of scoring here, so give me the over 61.5 as well. If you guys made it to this point in the video, thank you. Make sure to comment your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know who you think is going to win. Do you think Tennessee has a shot? Let me know all of the reasons down in the comment section below, and I'll try to respond to your comments as well. If you guys liked what you saw today, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs. I'm planning to come out with a few more game previews later on in the week as well for college football and the NFL. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure to subscribe and turn on those post notifications. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.